East side, B side, what side are you on?
Hello and welcome back. This is Mary Poppins episode of A-Side, B-Side podcast.
I was like, we just did bed knobs and broomsticks last week, so I mean, I guess it fits. I'm just gonna have to make up a true crime because I didn't realize we were switching sides. Fine, I'll just tell the story of the usual suspects with changing the names, and no one will know. It'll be great.
Oh my gosh. How's it going,
So
Adam?
this guy, Myler Koze,
he walks with a limp on his left side.
On its left side, yeah. You don't. Mr. Germel Gint was.
Oh my gosh, how's your week been?
It's been good. It's been weird. It's been up. It's been down. I am blessed to have an 18-year-old oldest child now, which that is an amazing milestone that really doesn't mean a whole lot in reality.
It's a big deal,
because,
though.
I mean, it is, but also it doesn't mean that much to the parent. It's not like suddenly all that much changes, but I just feel so much older that I have a legal adult as an offspring now. But it's been a really good week. We got to hang out a couple times and do some shopping, and it is full on fall here in Minnesota. So I've been going out way less, which is both good for my TV watching and my pocketbook. Other than delivery, I still get a lot of delivery. But, it's been a good week. A lot of work, a lot of TV, and I am super excited that in about 13 hours, I will be taking my first full-on train trip. I ride the bus all the time, with the light rail in town, but I'm taking Amtrak for the first time tomorrow. So I'm very excited.
Where are you going?
I'm going to central Wisconsin to visit my parents with all of my offspring, and we're gonna do the whole end of fall, close up the lake place so they can head back to the sunny Arizona weather instead. And the hope was it'd still be decent out, but it's gonna be 20 degrees, so we will not be going out on the lake. Probably won't even try a bonfire because that's just a little too cold. But excited to get out for a couple days, and I am both apprehensive given my recent travel experiences where the bus trip was not so good. The plane trip went just fine. So there are two very different options here, and I'm
kind of in the middle. How is this gonna go?
Yeah, and I'm cautiously optimistic. I have heard. I've been cautioned by some friends in the past who have gone this route on the train that the tracks are shared with many businesses, and so sometimes if there is a delay with the business, or if they need to get through, or something doesn't go fast enough, or it's a longer train than they expected, that the passenger train is always the one that has to stop and wait. So okay. I'm very curious to see how that goes. We're not going far. It's a 3.5 hour, type of journey. So I'm also curious how that's going to be because I spent way longer in the bus, and this, again, I don't want to be confused by the pictures because I was sold a bill of goods by Greyhound, but I don't think Amtrak has as many partners, and I hope we're not going to be stopping at any fast food restaurants at the station. So I'm very excited about how it's going to go.
Maybe it'll be like Bullet Train with Brad Pitt. Have you seen that?
I have not. I've heard really good things about it. I also have been dying to watch the new version of Murder on the Nile, which was a sequel to Murder on the Orient Express. Those are both out and transportation mode. So maybe next week I will give it a breakdown of one of those, because it will definitely, if it's as cold as it is at the lake, we may have a movie night. So those would be very apropos.
Those would be very, very much so. So is tonight, as we record on a Wednesday, is tonight the season finale of She-Hulk?
No, it was last week. Last Thursday.
Oh, because I got an email from Apple or from Disney, and I was like, it says, it's saying stream the season finale, but I was thinking it was tonight. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was last Thursday. I enjoyed what they did. They did not do what I was afraid of, where they were going to take things too seriously. They set us up
That's
for it,
right. That's right.
and it was well done. And then because that was done, I also saw the finale of the Rings of Power, and they did do what I was afraid they were going to do. And I think it's fine because most people, like, I wanted the mystery of who Sauron was and who Gandalf was, and like who all these characters were and how we knew them to like get played out over a longer story.
Hmm.
But I'm pretty sure most people didn't want to wait like a year and a half to figure that out, so they had to give them something. So
Right.
I understand why they did it, but I'm more excited about where it goes in season 2. So hopefully She-Hulk gets another season. I'm starting to wonder if Marvel is not going to necessarily involve every single story in the big picture.
Hmm.
Where like every Marvel movie before definitely led to Avengers, Avengers Age of Ultron, and then of course, Infinity War, and all of that. But I'm wondering if now with all these shows, they're just gonna let some stuff be,
Just go.
you
Yeah.
know, just be its own thing, and that's totally cool. I did, however, did we talk? I'm trying to remember my timeline correct. Did I talk about the Werewolf by Night special movie?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I think I watched that like after our last recording, because that was really, really good and scary and gory, but I could watch it because it was in black and white, because my brain doesn't like
Take
it
black
takes
and white
gore in a different
seriously.
way. Yeah, it's so clearly different. But the story was just so well done, and I honestly was very excited about that to be a lead into maybe the Blade movie or the Black Knight movie, or even just doing this whole, monster universe on its own. Like the Tom Cruise um, Mummy movie was supposed to launch the monsters universe, the dark universe. It was going to be, uh, the Mummy and Frankenstein and Werewolf, like all these classic horror villains,
Hmm.
horror movie characters, and just bombed. This kind of feels like they did that, but instead of trying to make it about big stars and blockbusters, they're going to do it in a very like fun, almost economical way.
Hmm.
Not like cheap, but not over the top, and not hedge their bets whether it's got to be like a $1 billion movie to break even. And it was really well done. It was super interesting. It was scary and jump surprises, and then like more characters that I actually cared about than probably the last 3 mainstream Marvel movies, which is kind of sad to say, but like I never got invested in the Eternals characters. I didn't really feel any jeopardy for most of the people in Thor: Love and Thunder, or Doctor Strange. But this one, like, I cared about the characters, and I was worried about who was going to get out. So that was pretty great. And then I also had been holding off because I was already watching so many things weekly, with as well with my rewatch of White Collar and Bones, and also doing the NCIS stuff, which I've kind of liked the way they've gone this season. It's definitely way more of an ensemble show, and it was going that way last year, but they kept it going, and I like that. But I was like, I can't add another weekly show, so I'm going to wait to binge as much as possible. Was the Andor series, the Star Wars story of Cassian Andor, sort of a prequel to Rogue One. And honestly, Rogue One is probably the best new Star Wars property of the last like 8 years since they got relaunched.
Hmm.
This one might be number 2. It's really well done. I want to see more Star Wars characters where I don't have to worry about Jedi and Sith. Like there's a whole, for lack of a better term, a whole universe out there of characters that aren't, you know, wielding lightsabers. And it's, to me, that is a really interesting tack to go, and it's really well done. And that's not done yet, but I'm very excited to see where it goes tomorrow in the next episode.
Well, speaking of shows, that even though you say you're not binging anymore, I am going to start binging something because season 3 of Love is Blind has dropped. The first 4 episodes are out. So guess what I'll be doing later?
Dang, 3 already?
Yeah. So the first one, of course, dropped during the pandemic, and then it was almost a full year when the second season dropped. And I want to say it's been close to a year because I was here in Lincoln when the second season dropped.
Yeah, I feel like it was winterish though.
That's why I'm saying I don't think it's been a full year, but I think it's been almost a year.
Wow. I mean, I guess it's a different, the big gap between the first season and the second season probably had more to do with,
COVID
and shutdown of all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it says the new episode. Okay, wait, hold on. I'm there's already there's 4 episodes out, and the new one is on the 26th.
Yeah, so they dropped the 4 episodes, and they're going to drop 3 next week, and then they're going to drop 3 more, and then 1, which means there's 11, which I think is a little bit more than typical.
It feels like a lot.
Normally it's 10 episodes, and this one's 11, so 11 might be the reunion.
Oh yeah, they do love those reunion shows.
Yeah. So February, it was February of this year that season 2 came out. So so they were like, all right, let's get on it. So and then like 2 weeks ago they did like a little Love is Blind after the altar with an update, and well, spoiler alert, none of the couples are together.
Oh, well, I mean, statistically, 50% of couples end anyway, or it's got to probably be higher than that right now. If you're even talking about that's married couples.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think it should be that shocking that a bunch of people that were maybe in it for the fame
aren't together anymore.
Although what did you, we talked about this last week, that couple on
Married at First Sight. Yeah.
Yeah. It's still going strong. So it does happen. Strong.
And then there are a couple from 2 couples actually from the very first season, Lauren and Cam and Amber and Barnett. I know for a fact Lauren and Cam are still together. I believe Amber and Barnett are still together. I haven't heard any news of them splitting. Of course, that would be all over. So yeah.
But that was the one where you were like, I know that she is really into him, and I think he's really into her.
Yeah.
But their backgrounds and like lifestyles are so diametrically opposed. So like when they started, when they tried to begin to meld their lives, it was like, oh, so where do you live? Just mentioning other people's couches.
Yes, that was them. So I believe they're still together, and maybe it's the whole opposites attract thing, and that's why they're working. But anyway, so I will of course keep you posted next week about how the new season, how do I feel about it? I feel like I have to take each season as its own. Like, yes, it's Love is Blind, but nothing's going to compare to the very first season because it was brand new. There has been nothing like it before. So but I'm interested to see how it goes.
And it felt like it was the perfect time.
Yeah,
we were all locked inside, and so it mirrored reality in this weird way that I don't think they expected.
Yeah
because we couldn't go out and see anybody, so we're all kind of doing this even with our like friends and family, where we're having Zoom meetups for like happy hour, playing Jackbox games, and all of a sudden this dating show is like kind of felt like we were in it at the same time. So it's one of those fun like moments in pop culture history that just the timing was right.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'll keep you posted. But aside from that, I think it's just been my typical shows. The Rookie, love that show. Oh, love that show so much. Now there's The Rookie Fed, and then The Patient. There's only one more episode of that. Next week will be the last episode of The Patient with Steve Carell and Domhnall Gleeson. Domhnall. This is fun. So of course I love Big Sky. Reba is on Big Sky, and I think I told you that I like tweeted it about her, and she liked my tweet, which was like, that's exciting. Well, Darius Rucker is going to be on Big Sky. Of course, Hootie and the Blowfish, and now Darius is crossed over the country. And then Lyle Lovett, who was married to Julia Roberts for a while, country singer as well, he's going to be on Big Sky. And then another country singer, Jimmy Allen, who was on Dancing, was he on Dancing with the Stars? I think he was on Dancing with the Stars. Mom said he was on Dancing with the Stars. He's going to be on the Connors.
I'll believe it. I think at this point, when we say Darius Rucker and we feel the need to talk about Hootie the Blowfish, I think he's been a country artist longer than he was a Hootie and the Blowfish.
I think so.
So that might be one of those moments where I think the kids call it aging yourself.
Oh yeah. Well, if they watch Friends, they know Hootie and the Blowfish. They reference him on a Friends episode.
This is true. Yeah. I mean, I love Hootie and the Blowfish. I get Cracked Review is probably in my top 30 most played albums, and Scattered, Smothered, and something else. Scattered, Smothered, and Covered. They released this album of all the songs that they played when they were just a bar band. They were all like cover songs. So much fun. But I love cover songs as well, but just as a rule. But yeah, he's probably been Darius Rucker longer than he's been a Hootie.
Don't call him Hootie. He doesn't like that.
Can you imagine if everybody was like, Angela Lansbury, star of the movie Gaslight, has passed away? Everyone would be like, yeah, but wasn't she in that other thing that like, we all know about?
Oh man. So this week is episode 113, Adam.
Which we both thought was going to be 112. So at least
Totally
twice
did.
in the last 5 minutes, I have stopped myself from segueing into my A-side, because the A-side comes second in episode 113. And even though all day long I was planning like quippy segues, I'm now going to have to figure out something that goes with, hey, so that guy died.
Hey, and there was crime. Real quick, last week we mentioned that there was an active serial killer in California. He has been caught. There were some tips that came into police to lead them to the suspect. The suspect, they did like a sting operation where they followed the suspect for several hours, and they said that he appeared to be on the hunt for another victim, but
Ooh.
they were able to make an arrest. So hopefully they've got the right guy and these murders stop.
I like, it shouldn't shock me. But, like, it almost feels like there are so many people out there that are tuned into true crime right now that like you have so many amateur detectives out there that maybe people would find stuff to help with. And not to steal from the start of the B-side here, but I did want to mention this because I thought about us when it happened. I was watching an episode of Bones from like season 3 or 4, so like 12, 13 years ago, pre like podcast boom. And they're on it's very much the sort of murder on a train style trope. They're on an airplane that's on its way from DC to Beijing. But there are 2 little old ladies who are mystery novel nuts who are helping throughout the investigation. And I'm like, this entire episode could be the same right now, and just pretend that they have a true crime podcast, because they're like asking questions the entire time. And it was so surreal, because I'm like, these are just true crime fans, true crime podcast fans, but it's like 5 years before podcasts were existing. And so they're just book club people. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, the overlap there. And I immediately thought, I was like, I gotta talk about this.
Oh man. All right, are you ready for the B-side?
Yes, I'm stealing my heart and my gullet and my stomach, so
You should.
I can
You absolutely 100% should.
I always do, but I don't know. I got a feeling it's October. Things get a little scarier, so I'm ready, as I'm gonna be.
So last week, Adam, we talked about the Italian serial killer Leonardo Cianciulli, who made her victims into tea cakes
and then fed them to her guests.
Well, this week they're not tea cakes, but something different.
So do we need to add potentially a like bullet point on the female serial killer list?
What would that be?
Is this also a female?
No, this is a male.
Oh, okay.
But
because I was like, if it's poison and for money and also turn them into baked goods, like that's gonna be seems rather sexist.
No, but you're not gonna want to eat anything during this.
That's all right. I have my big meal for the day already. Thank you, Tono's Pizzeria. If anybody's listening, I'll take a free slice.
Do they have gluten-free? Because I'd take one too.
They do.
Oh, all right. So this week we are talking about Joseph Roy Metheny, aka Joe. He was born on March 2nd of 1955. It's been said that he was neglected as a child, and this made him depressed. His father was an alcoholic who was killed in a car accident when he was 6 years old. And he claims that his mother neglected him and his 5 siblings, but she was actually working. It wasn't that she was neglecting. She says, I was working 2 jobs outside of the house to take care of all of my children. He said that his parents
Kids don't know that though. They just you're not around. You know?
Right. But he says his mom often sent him to live with other family members in a foster-like arrangement. His mom says that they were somewhat poor. Again, she had to work really hard. She worked multiple jobs. She was a waitress, a barmaid, a food truck driver, because she's providing for her children. But she said, I feel like I provided them a fairly normal lifestyle and they never went hungry. She says they were never put into any homes of family members like her son Joe claims. She says that Joe was really smart and he had a good childhood. And she said if he was neglected, it was because of his own fault. She said, I believe it was a pretty good home.
I'm sorry. I don't think you can neglect I guess emotionally you can neglect yourself.
Yeah.
But I don't think
maybe he's just trying to make himself a victim. Himself. I don't know. Like, it's kind of a he said, she said situation. We don't know. We weren't there for his childhood. We just know what kind of a person he turned out to be.
Fair.
So Joe joins the military. He joins the army when he's 17 or when he's 18 in 1973. I don't know why that 70 just kept jumping out of me.
There's a 19, there's an 18, there's a 7 in there. There's a lot of numbers.
His mom said that he served in Germany, although he claims that he served a tour in Vietnam and he became addicted to heroin while over there in an artillery unit. His mom says, I don't remember him being in Vietnam, which you would think she would remember that, but
yeah, I feel like that this is another sign maybe that this guy told a few embellishments, as they say.
Right. So his time in service, it was hard to verify. Nobody could verify whether he was in Germany, whether he was in Vietnam, whether he served at all. And America's involvement in Vietnam had ended by the time he would have gone over there. So did he really serve in Vietnam? That's a scratcher.
I mean, I could dunk in middle school. I lost the vertical.
So Joe, once he joined the military, he kind of withdrew from his mom and they kind of went their separate ways. She said he just kept drifting further and further away. I think the worst thing that ever happened to him was drugs. It's a sad, sad story. So Joe Metheny, as he's older, he becomes known as Tiny, which is kind of funny. Why is that always the case? The big guys are always called Tiny, or they're always like these little the names that are like completely opposite. Like,
yeah, it's the ironic nickname.
Yeah,
like Biggie Smalls, who was not small.
Right. You got Tiny.
I think it's just lazy nicknaming. I mean, and to be honest, like who's giving nicknames more often than not? It is children, and children tend to go for the easy out. So yeah.
So Joe Metheny, aka Tiny, was actually 6'1", and he was a big build guy, and he was overweight.
I wish I was tiny.
He had been spending some time in bars, and he was living with like in homeless camps in South Baltimore. And he was spending nearly all the money that he made on crack, heroin, and alcohol. He had a steady job, though. He was a forklift driver, and he was actually pretty well liked by people. He was described as intelligent, well-spoken, and very well-mannered. Well, in 1994, Joe had a girlfriend that lived with him along with her 6-year-old son. They all lived together in South Baltimore. Like I said, he was a truck driver, and this would have him out on the road for long stints, long periods of time. So during one of these long trips, he comes home and his girlfriend and son are gone.
Oh.
Well, like Joe, she had a drug problem. So Joe thought, oh, she's left me for another man. He's furious. He becomes enraged. He spends days looking for them, thinking that they're like living on the streets with this new guy. He checked like halfway houses, and he even checked under a bridge that he knows that his girlfriend used to buy and do drugs. So he goes and looks under the bridge. He doesn't find his girlfriend there, but he does find two men who had known her. So he asks them about this girlfriend, and they're like, sorry, man, we don't know anything. So he's so pissed off, he kills these two men.
Oh, okay. That escalated quickly, as they say.
Uh-huh. Well, immediately after, they're under a bridge. There's some water. Apparently, there's a fisherman nearby, and he's afraid that the fisherman saw what happened, so he kills the fisherman as well. Yeah. So it's been said that these crimes of passion, obviously he's enraged because he's passionate over trying to find his ex-girlfriend. So these crimes of passion, they've been said to have spawned his drive to kill. He kills all three victims. He tosses them in the river to hide their bodies. He later ends up finding out, a spoiler alert, girlfriends moved across town with, quote, he says, quote, some asshole that's had her selling her ass for drugs. They got busted and they took my son away from me. They took my son away from them for neglect and child abuse. Oof. So Joe ends up arrested for the three murders, but no bodies, no evidence. After a year and a half of sitting in jail, he's released. Well, that year and a half did not seem to calm his rage at all. He kills Kathy Ann Magaziner. She's a 39-year-old woman. He buries her body in a shallow grave on the site of the factory where he worked. The body was there. No, the body was there for more than 2 years. He later claimed.
Well, I mean, actually, that's pretty impressive.
That she was there for 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I figured like you buried this at work, you're gonna get caught like right away. But I guess.
Yeah, I know. It was a shallow grave on the site. So, he later claims that he had strangled her, and they dug up her skeleton 6 months later, and he. Warning. This is graphic. He claims he put her head in a box and threw it in the trash.
I love when you say warning, this is graphic, because then the graphic part of Adam's brain goes off on a tangent. And whatever you say seems horribly calm in comparison. So that's a very good tactic. I like it.
In 1996, Joe Metheny kills Kimberly Lynn Spicer. So this is again right after he gets out. So he kills her by stabbing her with a knife. He then kidnaps a woman named Rita Kemper on December 8th of 1996. He kidnaps her and he attempts to sexually assault her. Apparently, he had shared drugs with her in a trailer that he was living in, and she refused to have sex with him, and she runs out of the trailer. He chases after her. He catches her. He beats her up. He drags her back into the trailer. He like rips her clothes off, and he attempts to rape her. Rita Kemper said that he had attempted to murder her, saying, I'm going to kill you and bury you in the woods with the other girls. She was able to escape through the window of the trailer, and she fled to police officers that were in the area. So now, remember, he just killed, he killed Kimberly Lynn Spicer right before he kidnaps Rita Kemper. And so she's buried. So he asks a friend to help. Actually, she hadn't been buried. He had her hiding. He asks a friend to help him bury the body of Kimberly Lynn Spicer that he'd been hiding at the factory since he killed her. So the friend is like, yeah, sure, man, I'll help you. And then he goes to the police. His friend reports this to the police on December 15th of 1996. And Joe Metheny is arrested and he's charged with her murder that same day. The owner of the factory is also arrested and charged with murder, because
the body was there, and they're like, "Hey, let's
the body
cover
was there,
bases."
right?" So They were
Yeah.
arrested like leaving a Christmas party. And so Metheny is arrested for the murder, and the owner of the company is arrested as an accessory after the fact because he allegedly got rid of some evidence. So once he's
Gotcha.
arrested, Joe just starts
That does answer the immortal question.
of
How do you make a company holiday party worse?
ew. Yeah, well, yeah.
You get arrested.
You get arrested. So once he's arrested, he just starts confessing to these murders. Like he confesses to Kimberly Lynn Spicer. He leads police to her grave. He leads police to the grave of Kathy Ann Magaziner that he had murdered. All of her remains. Police were able to identify her skull from dental records. He admitted to police that he had killed other people, sex workers who were addicted to cocaine and heroin. Those killings also, according to Metheny, included brutal sexual assaults. He was indicted for the killing of Tony Lynn Ingracia, who was 28, but those charges were dropped because, well, they didn't have enough evidence, which I'll tell you why here in a second. He also claims to have killed 3 other sex workers along Washington Boulevard in Baltimore, although there's no evidence of those crimes other than his confession, and here is why. So Joe Metheny, we're going to get a little wacky here, a lot wacky, really. He's telling police about his crimes. He tells them about what he did with the other victims. He killed them, the sex workers, where they couldn't find the bodies and had no evidence. He killed them. He took them home. He dismembered them, and he stored them in Tupperware in his freezer. What he couldn't fit, he buried at that factory where he worked, where him and his boss were arrested.
Goodness.
So what would he do with the meat in his freezer? Well, you see,
I would assume, like any of us, he just leaves it in there for way too long and forgets about it.
No, he would ground it up and mix the flesh with pork and with beef and make hamburger patties. He would then cook them and sell them out of a barbecue stand that he had opened up on the side of the road. And
oh, see, no.
Whenever he
like
needed
I was,
his,
I was prepared not to eat today, but now I can never eat from a roadside stand.
Yeah, he said whenever he needed his special meat, he'd pick up another sex worker. He'd pick up more. He was quoted as saying, "The human body tastes very similar to pork. If you mix it together, no one can tell the difference." Hence why there was no evidence of the crimes of his murders of the sex workers.
All right. So remember the episode of Bones I was talking about where they're all in the plane? They use that same line that human tastes mostly like pork.
Yeah.
Almost word for word.
I've heard that several times from people that have been known to be cannibals.
I mean, is that just because pork doesn't really taste like anything? It's always about like what you put on it.
I don't know. I don't want to think about it. No, let's moving on.
Sorry.
So he's arrested and he's tried in the case of Rita Kemper, the attempted kidnapping, and he's given a sentence of 50 years for kidnapping and attempted sexual assault. He's acquitted of the charge of attempted murder for her. He is, however, sentenced to death for the murder of Kimberly Lynn Spicer. At his sentencing, he said that he committed the murders because he, quote, enjoyed it and he got a rush and a high out of it. He said, "I have no real excuse of why I did it other than I like it." He said the words "I'm sorry" will never come out for they would be a lie. The only thing I feel bad about in any of this is that I didn't get to murder those 2 mother bleep bleeps I was really after. That's my ex old lady and that bastard she got hooked up with. In August of 1998, he pled guilty to murdering and robbing Kathy Ann Magaziner, and prosecutors sought the death penalty in that case. He ended up receiving a sentence of life in prison. His death sentence was actually overturned in 2000, and the sentence for the murder of Kimberly Lynn Spicer was reduced to life without parole. So that means he's serving several life sentences. Joe Metheny was found unresponsive in his prison cell at the Western Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland on August 5th of 2017. At 3 p.m., he was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. And there you have it. That is the very gruesome story of the Butcher of Baltimore. I don't even think that's really his nickname. I made it up because it seemed very fitting because he's, barbecuing people.
The BBQ Butcher of Baltimore, yeah.
The BBQ Butcher of Baltimore.
See, we could totally write true crime TV shows.
I think so.
It's all about alliteration. That's really what it is.
Ugh, how gruesome is that? I mean, tea cakes and now barbecue. We went from dessert to the main course.
I just don't get, like, even he said it. He's like, man, I really should have gone after people I was actually mad at.
Yeah,
then why didn't you, dude?
I don't get it. That was what spawned it all, was his rage at her. But why? I don't want you to hurt anybody, but yeah, you just took this out on completely innocent people.
I was like, you're so mad. You're like, I'm so mad at them, but I don't want to drive across town.
I'm just gonna go to the bridge. There you go.
Yeah, whatever's closest. I mean, they're lucky they're not within 2 more miles.
They were on the next block, buddy, I tell you. But yeah.
Well, I at this point I'm fine. Speaking of the dead, I'm glad that he met a untimely end and was caught before he did too much. And again, it makes you wonder, like, these people don't get caught, they'll just keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what police figured, like, if he hadn't been caught. But do you think he died from like heart disease? Like, and this is a very gruesome thought, but like pork is like high in cholesterol. Like,
I mean, maybe. I feel like the fact that they didn't say anything means that something happened in the prison, and no one was all that upset.
Yeah.
Because if they said if he was found unresponsive.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I sleep real hard and I'm unresponsive. That's a very vague statement.
Oh, but there you go. That is the story of the BBQ Butcher of Baltimore, Joe Metheny, and that is the B-side.
So, as I mentioned, I had all of these clever segues.
You can't segue out of
we're talking.
You can't segue out of the BBQ Butcher of Baltimore? Come on.
I can't. I really can't. Although the BBQ Butcher of Baltimore does sound almost musical. Like the Butcher of Fleet Street, or like Sweeney Todd or something. So I feel like you could almost turn it into a musical. So I wish I was doing a musical like I did last week with Bed Knobs and Broomsticks. But for 4 consecutive A-sides, we've been talking about fantasy and that area of pop culture. And I wanted to go very far away from that. And you're like, oh, obviously, Adam, you're going to talk about some drama, something that's serious, because that's the opposite of fantasy. And I was like, no, I'm clearly going to do sci-fi. So I was thinking about some of my favorite sci-fi films that we could talk about. And one that kept popping up that I don't feel like gets enough attention, but also I have a very, as ever, a personal issue in that the films that led up to this, which right now, as of now, is the last in a entire series of films that 2 creators, or especially one creator and animator, worked on, this being the last one. If I didn't even realize how the career arc of this particular animator and their storytelling grew and changed almost in step with me growing up. So when I was a kid, I loved Disney movies, but I didn't love the same ones that everybody else loved. I mean, everybody loves Disney movies, but everyone has their favorites. But like one of my favorites was the Sherlock Holmes with Basil of Baker Street, or the Robin Hood where he's a fox, or the Rescuers. I thought were like pretty much superheroes when I was a little kid. And so everyone else loved Disney. They were like Mickey Mouse. I was like, yeah, Basil of Baker Street. People are like, what? Is that like the British Mickey Mouse? What are you talking about? What I didn't realize, and what I love about doing the research for every one of the A-sides, is I usually start out with something I think I know a lot about, I care about, and then I learn so much more about it than I ever knew before. And then I find either ways that I love it more, or it ruins it completely.
Aw.
This, it very rarely ruins it completely. 9 times out of 10, it will be better. The only one that it's really made, like, for some reason, and it is not something I remotely cared about before I did research, but we talked about Fate the Winx saga a
Oh
couple
yeah.
episodes ago,
Yeah.
and how they got rid of all the technology in it because it was
Mhm.
like future tech future in
Mhm.
the cartoon, which I never knew about, and I enjoyed the show just fine without. But for some reason, not knowing that, but now I know that, it still bugs me, which makes no sense whatsoever. It is like information that doesn't really change, shouldn't change my enjoyment, but it does annoy me.
Yeah.
This one, however, the more I learned about it, the more I connected with it and realized that how much of Don Bluth's work mirrored my own, timeline of adulthood. So Don Bluth started out as a animator. He's a film director. He was at Disney in his early days. He was an animator on the Robin Hood, where they're all animals. He was on Winnie Pooh. He was involved in the Rescuers, and as well as probably the natural progression from Mary Poppins to Bedknobs and Broomsticks, where they took, the same idea of this magical lady, but then adding more serious things. And then a couple years later, Pete's Dragon comes out, which, again, we could do an entire. I probably should do an entire segment on Pete's Dragon, where there's so much of
Please
that
do.
is so
I
much,
love that movie. Oh my gosh.
but there are themes in it that are so much seriouser, so much more serious than I as a kid even realized. It is there's some big things that Pete's got to deal with there, and even the idea of Pete's Dragon and why Pete's Dragon exists, and why he leaves when he's by the end because he doesn't need him anymore, and how this is almost psychological in a way,
Mm-hmm.
is amazing. I had no idea that Don Bluth was connected with Robin Hood or the Rescuers. I mean, it makes sense that he was, came from Disney, but what I knew him for were his own films. And the idea that seeing a Don Bluth film for me was almost as exciting as, a Steven Spielberg movie or George Lucas, or probably more exciting at that age, because one of his first animated films, or one of the he was best known for early on, came out in 1982. So at the age of 1, The Secret of Nim, which I've watched way too many times. It took at least 15 years to truly understand what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one of his was when I was 5, American Tail, which I
Fievel.
still, Fievel and Fievel Goes West, man. My mom sang me songs from Sound of Music and Mary Poppins to go to sleep, but American Tail was also on there. And I still swear that There Are No Cats in America is the precursor to modern political discourse, because we're just going to tell you stuff that is propaganda and clearly not true, but it's got a catchy tune, so you're going to believe it, and it prays to your hopes and dreams. Then he went on to do which is just it's West Side Story. It's so good. Then he went on to do Land Before Time in 1998, All Dogs Go to Heaven in 1989, which was one of the many reasons that I was insistent that we should get a dog when I was a kid. And then a little bit later, when I was 16 years old, Don Bluth Animation provided a princess for me to fall in love with Anastasia, which is one of my favorite films, and who also has an appearance by last week's subject of the A side, Angela Lansbury, as the dowager princess, the mother or the grandmother of Anastasia, who shows up at the beginning and sort of serves as the narrator. And then the last Don Bluth animation movie came out when I was 19 years old, and it starred a amazing cast, honestly, for the time. It was a space adventure about a young boy making his way into the world and finding his way, just as I myself, a 19-year-old, am trying to make my way in the world and find my own story. And that's why I loved I loved Titan AE when it came, with the fact that every one of his movies connected in a way, thematically and with a content. It almost feels like as I grew up, the stories got more and more mature. And Titan AE, which came out in 2000, is often blamed for the downfall of what was then Fox Animation Studios. And it came out the company folded 10 days after it came out. And so immediately everyone was like, well, this was the movie that killed it. Now, in my research, I have found varying reports that that is highly overblown. It was a cause and effect, like people see A and B, so that must mean C. But it was more that Fox Animation was on its way out, and they were about to lay everybody off because they didn't have any scripts to do movies, and they didn't do anything between like 97 and 2000 when the movie came, so they were hurting for a script. And they found this script and brought it to Don Bluth and his partner Gary Goldman and said, hey, do you want to do it? We need to do this. We'll probably close down the studio. So we've got a chicken or the egg scenario. Did Titan AE and its reaching for a new style, almost people would compare it to almost an American attempt at anime, which was cartoons for an older audience, where it was more about an antiquated idea that cartoons could only be for children. I mean, at this point, Simpsons is only 4 or 5, 6 years old, maybe 7 years old, and still an enigma. And South Park is just getting its footing. So the idea of animation that wasn't for the 12 or 10 and unders crowd was kind of strange. And even Disney was doing it, but they were still they were getting huge results, but it was all very family friendly fare. To do something that was a little grittier was different and had one of the things that drew me to it, the grunge rock late 90s early 2000s soundtrack was super exciting, and it had an amazing cast. As I mentioned, you've got Matt Damon as the lead, Bill Pullman, John Leguizamo, Nathan Lane, Janine Garofalo, Drew Barrymore. That is a pretty awesome cast of just voices. It was mentioned to be a live action film at one point, but couldn't get the funding, and they thought maybe we could do this better as an animation project because that is a little bit different in terms of scale. It also had Ron Perlman as one of the main characters' father, Tone Loc, Jim Brewer. It was a huge, awesome voice cast, and it was so perfect for me as a late teenager, early adult, to have an adventure story that seemed to be bridging all those animation films that I'd watched earlier and bringing into a new era. It mixed medias. You had many of the backgrounds were digitally animated, but then the main characters themselves and some of the most important other objects within the universe were drawn more traditionally. So you had this mix of new and old animation. And it's a wonderful adventure story, which shows some of the things that you could do at that time with animation that you couldn't do with CGI in the same way. The opening sequence where you've got the lead character, Cale Tucker, which Cale, back at that time, just was a cool space guy's name. It wasn't a thing we ate. We didn't know about Cale yet. It was a cool name. Now it's not his fault that it turned into a salad that no one wants to eat. But he's flying around outer space, and you meet this wonderful cast of characters, and it's almost this sort of Treasure Island feel to it. And then you've got Planet Treasure Island came out around that same time, within a few years as well. You've got this young person who maybe's got the key, the MacGuffin that can stop this interstellar war, and there was a backstory about being abandoned by your father, and there were a lot of things that critics were like, oh, this is way too familiar, it's very too close to Star Wars. And then you look at Star Wars and you're like, yeah, but Star Wars was just this other story. All the stories have similar elements, so saying it's not completely unique, unless we're doing something like the show that on Netflix last year with the guys with the triangle faces, masks,
Squid Game.
Squid Game. That was pretty unique, but I guess you could also say that was just Double Dare with consequences.
True, very true.
It didn't get a lot of attention, and it bombed in that it wasn't a huge critical success. But it's hard to say something wasn't a huge critical and monetary success when the company that it that birthed it, that launched it, did virtually no advertising and went out of business 10 days after it opened. So my opinion is that Titan A is not the film that killed Fox Animation Studios, but it is the film that Fox Animation Studios kind of kicked out of the nest at the very end, right before the entire nest went up in flame. It doesn't get a lot of attention. It didn't do well in theaters. However, it is a lot of fun. And if you are somebody like me who's from the late, kind of came to fruition or adulthood in the late 90s, early 2000s, the grunge soundtrack was something totally different that felt like it was in outer space. It has really unique visuals. It is way more, the characters are more developed and there's more edges and there's more depth than you expect from a cartoon of that era. And it is something that I really wish was available to stream for free. But after
So
4 weeks
you
of
brought
talking
us
about
another
this
one that we
films,
have to pay for.
I did. This is only available to rent on Vudu, iTunes, Google Play, or Amazon for $3.99, or you can find a DVD on Amazon. But we will link to the trailer on the website to check it out. It is a lot of fun. I love the mixed media part of traditional animation and digital animation. And the voice acting is so amazing. I wish, honestly, that they could have done the movie with these live action actors as well, because I think it would have been a really fun movie to do. But you could never afford to do the visuals, could never afford to do the level of just amazing possible outer space ideas and things for the same cost in live action. And that is the beauty of the film. Yes, is it perfect? No. Do you see some of the plot points coming? Sure. Is there a love story that probably doesn't need to be in there? Yes, it's a movie, but it is a lot of fun. The soundtrack is bopping, I think, as the kids would say. Or no, it's fire.
It's a
soundtrack
bop.
is fire.
It's not bopping.
It's a bop.
It's a bop.
Oh God, I'm so old. But I mean, these names are only going to matter to people who were in high school between 1996 and 2003. But the soundtrack, which I love soundtracks, of course, it was originally released on audio cassette in June of 2000, but it had artists like Lit, Power Man 5000, Fun Lovin' Criminals, The Urge, Jamiroquai, Luscious Jackson, all very fun bands, and they do a great soundtrack, which adds to the classical score, right? Like, you're like, wait a second, I know that. A lot of fun. It is the type of movie that if you have not spent time, or you have tweens or teenagers that you're going to sit down for a family movie night, but you might have a younger sibling or two that is a little bit younger and you don't want to have something that is too realistic or too gory. This is a great sort of family movie that can meet the needs of different generations and be a lot of fun. And I am happy that it reminded me of how much Don Bluth's career seemed to, and its maturation over time seemed to match my own. And it also means that I'm going to watch a lot of Don Bluth films in the next week. And I really hope that some of them are streaming, because the Amazon guy and I, we don't know each other that well, but we spend way too much time texting back and forth about my packages.
You've become very well acquainted.
Yeah. And luckily in my building, we have one of those things where they just put it in a locker, then I go down and get it. So we never have to meet face to face. So maybe this is Adam's own version of Love is Blind.
Oh man.
I'm here. I know you are. You're always here for me. No, sir, your package is downstairs.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right.
Yeah, so technically you can't stream it for free. You're gonna have to rent it or find a DVD online. There were also a series of books, of short novels, young adult novels that were released around the time that I never knew about, which I have on the way from Amazon. So once I finish those, just let me know and I'll just pass them on, because they give even more depth to the story of what was happening. It's got a 50% rating on the tomato meter. Audience score is just a little bit higher, but I think it gets a lot of flack for being the excuse of why there are no more Don Bluth animation movies, rather than being the most mature and most advanced storytelling and also creative outlet that they had before their studio went kaput.
Okay, awesome.
And that is the A side.
That's the A side. All right, Adam. Well, as you know, it's getting colder, which means maybe you need a blanket. Guess what? We've got them on our website. We got sweatshirts. You need one? We got them on our website.
I love how my dog is literally sitting on my bed right now, pouting, looking at me like, get me a blanket. Why didn't you get me a blanket yet? I'm sitting over here. Oh, yep, she's giving me that look. It's either I wish to go outside where it's not freezing, or I would like a blanket. I'm going to choose that that she wants a blanket. I'm going to go to A Side B Side podcast.square.site and check out our merch. And then you can also download all of our former episodes. You can subscribe to us on all of the different mediums. Even if you don't ever use a Spotify or Stitcher, you have a preferred one. It still helps us out if you subscribe. So if you want to swing by and just click on that, that would be awesome. Feedback is always welcome. If you blame Titan AE for shooting down the Fox Animation Studios and you'd like to have a text argument with me, or if you're worried that I'm texting the Amazon delivery guy too much, just shoot us a message and we'll go from there. You can buy Brooke a coffee at buyusacoffee.com. Then the tag is A Side B Side Podcast. That always helps with editing and also putting up with Adam's schedule, which is weird because I'll just be like, "Hey, we should do this on a Tuesday." And Brooke's like, "No, I have a life. Leave me alone." So she needs coffee to deal with that. What did I miss, Brooke?
No, you got it. You got it.
I did go on several tangents and at least one cul-de-sac. So we'll try to work on slowing that down in the future.
All right, there you go. That's episode 113. Thank you so much. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.